something strange greeted us. We immediately pulled alongside the ship. What we saw shocked us beyond belief. Something like this should have been impossible. According to the theory, everything began with Albert Einstein's madness. Einstein had been working on the unified field theory, and one version of this theory described how, through the energy flow fixed at certain angles by a massive electrical generator, light rays could be bent around an object, making the object completely invisible. The United States saw this as an opportunity and provided Einstein with every possible resource to achieve it. Allegedly, Nikola Tesla was chosen to assist him in the experiment. Thus, the two mad scientists were perhaps about to accomplish a miracle. The U.S. was preparing to enter World War I, and preparations were underway. They wanted to transport aid to the Allies across the Atlantic Ocean and protect the ships carrying it. But the Atlantic had become a nightmare for them. German U-boats, submarines, were sinking nearly 2 ships every day along with their crews. At the same time, rumors spread about mysterious experiments conducted by the Germans. Stories of experiments carried out by various countries circulated from ear to ear. Following these reports, the U.S. military also carried out dozens of experiments in the place everyone wondered about, Area 51, all in order to win the war. This collection of experiments was given a project name. The main objective of the experiments was simple: to stay one step ahead of the enemy. For example, in one of those experiments, ghost planes were being developed. These extraordinary aircraft, undetectable by radar at the time, provided significant advantages in warfare. But according to the theory, they carried out an even more extreme experiment, one with catastrophic consequences. The project was called the Philadelphia Experiment, an alleged military experiment said to have taken place on October 28, 1943. In this experiment, just like the ghost planes, the goal was to create ships that could not be detected by enemy forces. The U.S. Navy wanted to make its warships invisible to enemy radar, so they could dominate not only on land, but also at sea during the war. But the goal went beyond simple invisibility. They allegedly aimed to teleport a ship from one place to another. However, this experiment was far more advanced and seemingly impossible compared to the technology used in the ghost planes. The idea was supposedly inspired by claims that Einstein had conducted teleportation experiments based on his unified field theory. Einstein had reportedly worked on this research since 1925. Many studies and articles about the subject had been published in physics journals. There are people who believe he succeeded. The person who brought this experiment to the world's attention was Morris K. Jessup, a writer and researcher with a master's degree in astronomy, who also wrote extensively about UFOs. In 1950, Jessup received 2 letters from a retired sailor named Carlos Miguel Allende. In the letters, Carlos claimed that a naval ship had been teleported into another dimension. He also wrote that the U.S. had used Albert Einstein's research to teleport a military destroyer. All preparations for the experiment had been completed, and they were waiting to begin. According to the project, ships would appear instantly at desired locations without being detected by enemy radar. Scientifically, this was described as optical invisibility. The ship used in the experiment was the USS Eldridge DE-173, carrying a crew of 104. It was classified as a destroyer escort. According to one eyewitness, 275-kilowatt generators were mounted beneath the ship's forward upper turrets. From there, 4 magnetic beams would spread across the deck. These beams and radio waves would envelop the ship, rendering it invisible to enemies. The destroyer USS Eldridge stood slightly offshore near the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard when the experiment began. At 9 a.m. on June 22, 1943, power was supplied to the generators. A magnetic field began to form, after a greenish mist enveloped the ship. The USS Eldridge completely vanished from sight. For a brief moment, only the ship's anchor could still be seen. Then it disappeared as well. There was no mist anymore, no USS Eldridge. We were staring at an empty sea. The high-ranking officers and scientists aboard our ship watched this unbelievable success. In fear, astonishment, and excitement, barely breathing. The ship and its crew had vanished not only from radar, but also before our eyes. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. 15 minutes later, the order was given, and the generator switches were shut off. At first, nothing happened. Then the green mist began to reappear, and the USS Eldridge slowly materialized once again. The ship had allegedly reappeared 640 kilometers away at the Norfolk Naval Base. 15 minutes later, it was brought back, but nothing was the same anymore. As the sounds faded, something strange caught our attention. We immediately approached the ship. What we saw horrified us. Something like this should have been impossible. Some crew members had become fused into the ship's metal walls after the teleportation. Their bodies were partially embedded in the steel itself. Some sailors had completely disappeared and never returned. The experiment appeared to have succeeded, but because of its horrifying consequences, all work was supposedly terminated. According to the claims, several extremely important figures worked on the experiment. We already mentioned Albert Einstein. Others allegedly included Dr. John von Neumann and Nikola Tesla. These were undeniably brilliant minds with radical ideas. According to the theory, after the Philadelphia experiment ended disastrously, the U.S. government refused to acknowledge it. The U.S. government refused to acknowledge it and denied that it had ever taken place. Approximately 12 years later, in 1955, Carlos Miguel Allende sent another letter to Dr. Morris Jessup. And this is where things become even stranger. Jessup asked Carlos to send another letter explaining the event in greater detail. Soon afterward, a second letter arrived. In the letter, Carlos wrote that in order to prove his claims, any method could be used on him, including hypnosis and truth serum techniques. 9 years passed. In April 1959, Jessup told his doctor friend Mason Valentine that he had finally obtained conclusive evidence related to the experiment, and asked to meet the following day. They were supposed to have dinner together on April 20th, but that dinner never happened. On the night they were supposed to meet, Dr. Jessup was found dead inside his car in a park in Miami. According to the police report, he had committed suicide by carbon monoxide poisoning from the car's exhaust, and the alleged notes about the experiment were gone. Naturally, this incident deeply affected the credibility and mystery surrounding the entire story. Valentine later stated, "The interaction of these non-linear fields is an extremely complex energy phenomenon. Intentionally created abnormal magnetic conditions can affect both the physical body and the psychological state in devastating ways. Under such circumstances, the time factor, which is not an independent entity but part of the matter-energy continuum, may become distorted." In short, he believed such an experiment could theoretically be possible. At this point, some questions may come to mind. For example, why wasn't the experiment first tested on a smaller ship? Of course, we cannot be certain that it wasn't. Those attempting to teleport an entire warship may very well have conducted earlier tests using smaller objects or unmanned vessels. The incident we heard about may have been the final stage of the experiment, and because it failed so catastrophically, it was permanently abandoned. There may also have been many reasons for keeping the failed experiment secret. The trust of allied nations and the United States, the need to explain the deaths of crew members to their families, the political and military damage caused by such a failure. None of these were minor concerns, however. It must also be said that apart from witness testimonies and rumors, there are no official documents proving the experiment ever happened. The Naval Historical Center archives stated that there is no evidence confirming the event, and no records indicating that the Navy conducted such an experiment. Even after more than 80 years, the truth remains unknown. There are claims, there are disturbing stories, a mysterious death, and detailed testimonies that continue to raise suspicion. Perhaps one day, a file stamped "Top Secret" will finally be opened, and the darkness surrounding the Philadelphia experiment will be illuminated. Until then, it remains one of history's greatest mysteries, until the next mystery is chosen.